Hey, let's be real for a second. Living alone as you get older isn't all peace and freedom like people make it sound. Sure, no one's around to hog the TV remote, but there are some harsh truths that sneak up on you when it's just you and four quiet walls. Some of them are funny in you gotta laugh to keep from crying kind of way, and others hit right where it hurts. Today, I want to walk you through some of those realities, things most people don't talk about. But I promise, we're going to tackle them like two old pals swapping stories over coffee. So stick with me. You might hear a little bit of your own life in here. Number 1. You can go days without anyone saying your name. Here's the thing, friend. Your name is more than just a label. It's recognition. It's the little verbal tap on the shoulder that says, hey, you exist, you matter, you're part of the story. When you live alone, it's shockingly easy to go days without hearing it. Nobody's calling you from the kitchen. Nobody's saying, can you grab the salt, Margaret? Or, your turn to feed the dog, Bill. You're just you, floating in silence. One man I talked to said he hadn't heard his name for 4 straight days until the pharmacist read it out loud when handing over his medication. He laughed when he told the story, but then he paused and admitted it made him emotional, like he'd been invisible and suddenly someone had switched the lights back on. And I'll be honest with you, this gets under your skin in ways you don't expect. Humans are wired for acknowledgement. When no one says your name, it feels like you're drifting off the page. What helps? Well, the simple stuff actually matters. Joining a class where the instructor does roll call. Picking up the phone and calling a friend, even just to hear them greet you. Or my favorite little hack, teaching your Alexa or Google device to say, "Good morning, Walter." You might laugh, but when you hear a cheerful robot call you by name while you're making coffee, you don't feel quite so invisible. 2. No one notices the tiny changes in your health. Living with someone means you've got built-in eyes on you. A spouse, a roommate, even a nosy grandkid will say, hey, you're limping more today, or that cough sounds rough. Those little observations are lifesavers, literally. When you live alone, though, you don't have that mirror. Tiny changes can sneak by until they're big, ugly problems. Swelling ankles, slow weight loss or gain, even subtle mood dips. You just brush them off as normal aging. Until suddenly, they're not. I remember a woman online sharing how she ignored her swollen feet for weeks. She just thought, oh well, I've been on them a lot. Turned out it was early heart failure, and she didn't know until it was serious. What shook her most wasn't the diagnosis. It was the realization that if her husband were still alive, he would have spotted it in a heartbeat. This is the brutal part of living alone. You have to be your own watcher. You're both the patient and the detective. And that means creating little systems. A quick journal where you jot, energy low today, ankles puffy. A mirror check before you leave the house. Do I look more tired than usual? Even snapping a selfie once a week just to see if your face or posture is changing. Sounds funny, but it works. Because here's the harsh truth, my friend. When you live alone, the first line of defense against your health slipping is you. And if you're not paying attention, nobody else is. 3. Your memory becomes your only witness. This one's sneaky, and it hits harder the older you get. When you live alone, there's nobody else to say, yes, you took your pill, or no, you didn't turn off the stove. It's just your memory versus reality, and sometimes memory loses. I know a man, 74, who nearly burned his kitchen down twice because he left the burner on after boiling water for tea. Both times he got distracted and wandered off. He told me, if my wife were still here, she'd have caught it in a second. Instead, it was just him and the smoke alarm having a screaming match. And it's not always dangerous. It can just be exhausting. Did I lock the front door? Did I call the doctor back? Did I feed the cat twice or not at all? You end up second-guessing yourself constantly. It's like living with an unreliable roommate, except the roommate is your own brain. That's the harsh reality. When you live alone, your memory is your only witness, and sometimes it's a liar. The trick is, you can't just trust it. You have to outsmart it. Timers on the stove, smart plugs that cut power automatically, pillboxes that beep at you like a nagging spouse. Notes on the door that say, "Locked? Check again." It might feel silly, but let me tell you, nothing feels sillier than calling the locksmith because you locked yourself out 3 times in 1 month. And here's the funny part. You start to narrate out loud like, "Okay, stove off, keys in pocket." You sound like a one-man sitcom, but honestly, it works. You turn your voice into the witness your memory can't always be. 4. A small accident can snowball into a crisis. When you live alone, even the tiniest mishap can spiral into something bigger than it should be. You drop a glass jar and suddenly it's not just a mess, it's a safety hazard. You've got to bend down to clean it up. Your knees don't bend like they used to, and now you're on the floor with sharp shards and no one to steady you as you stand back up. That oops moment becomes a full production. I know a woman, Shirley, 79, who spilled juice in her kitchen. No big deal, right? Except she slipped on it while reaching for a rag, landed hard, and bruised her hip. It wasn't broken, thank God, but she said the scariest part wasn't the fall itself. It was lying there on the floor for 10 minutes, realizing no one would have noticed if she couldn't get up. Imagine lying there staring at the ceiling and thinking, if this was worse, I might be here till tomorrow. That's the cruel math of living alone. What would have been a 5-minute cleanup for 2 people suddenly becomes an hour-long ordeal solo, and accidents don't ask if you're ready for them. They just happen. So you adapt. You keep your phone on you even when you're just puttering around the house. You swallow your pride and get a medical alert bracelet. Because honestly, it's less embarrassing to wear a button than to lie helpless on the bathroom floor waiting for someone to knock on the door 3 days later. And you start to set up your house like a partner. Grab bars, non-slip rugs, things within reach. Not because you're fragile, but because you're smart. 5. Silence makes you second-guess reality. When you live alone, the silence is not just peaceful. It can get loud in its own way. A creak in the hallway, a click in the pipes, a shadow across the window. Normally, with someone else there, you'd shrug it off. They'd say, "Relax. It's the plumbing." And you'd laugh, roll over, and go back to sleep. But when it's just you, suddenly every sound is a question mark. Was that the house settling? Or someone trying the door? Did I imagine it? Or did the fridge just sigh at me? Your brain runs wild because there's no one there to confirm or deny. And let's be honest, when it's midnight and you're in your pajamas, you're not exactly feeling like a superhero ready to take on burglars. I remember a widower telling me that after his wife passed, the house just creaked louder. He started getting up 3 or 4 times a night to check the doors, because in silence, your brain becomes your worst roommate. It whispers, "Better check again. What if you're wrong?" And here's where humor sneaks in. You'll catch yourself talking to the noise, saying things like, "All right, if you're a ghost, make it quick. I've got laundry tomorrow." Or threatening the fridge like it's a burglar. It's funny, but it's also proof of how silence can mess with your head. That's why little things like a motion light outside or a doorbell camera aren't just gadgets. They're peace of mind. Because nothing shuts your brain up faster than glancing at your phone and seeing, nope, just a raccoon. 6. Social stamina shrinks. Then social skills get a bit rusty. Here's one most folks don't admit until it's already happening. When you live alone long enough, your social stamina, the ability to chat, laugh, hold a conversation, starts to shrink. It's like a muscle. If you don't use it, it gets weak. And it sneaks up on you. At first, you're just skipping 1 coffee outing. Then a few months later, the idea of making small talk with a neighbor feels like running a marathon. Suddenly, you're nervous to answer the phone because you're out of practice. That's not loneliness. That's rust. A guy named Ed 74, shared that he stopped calling his fishing buddies for almost a year. Not because he didn't care. He said he felt socially out of shape. His words, like he wouldn't know what to say anymore. When he finally forced himself to call, he started small. 5 minutes, quick updates. By week 3, they were back to arguing over bait like no time had passed. But it took pushing through that rust to get there. And here's the part we have to laugh at. The rust makes you awkward. You catch yourself oversharing or talking too long about your tomato plants. Then later you sit there cringing, thinking, why did I tell them about the mildew on my cucumbers? But you know what? People don't notice as much as you think. They're just glad to hear from you. The truth is, social stamina isn't gone. It's just a little dusty, and the only way to clean it off is to use it. Start small. A quick text, a 3-minute call, even chatting with the cashier. You don't need to leap into a dinner party. Think of it like walking after an injury. You start with a few steps, then the strength comes back. 7. Time blurs together. When you live alone, days don't just pass. They smear into each other like watercolors left out in the rain. Monday feels suspiciously like Thursday, and before you know it, you're wondering if you actually did take the trash out last week, or if that was in fact 2 weeks ago. Without someone else in the house to mark time, we've got church on Sunday. Remember, it's game night Friday. The calendar starts to lose its edges. A man online once confessed he realized it was Christmas Eve only because the mail didn't come. He had been so wrapped up in his quiet routines that holidays slipped past like strangers. That's the danger of blurred time. It doesn't just make you forget dates, it can make you feel like life itself is slipping by in a haze. And the humor in it? Sometimes you'll convince yourself you've had the most productive day, only to look around and realize all you did was water the plants. Twice. At least they're thriving, right? The fix isn't magic. It's anchors. Things that stamp your days with meaning. Tuesday might be market day. Thursday you walk with the neighbor. Saturday you treat yourself to pancakes. Without those anchors, the blur wins. With them, time feels real again. 8. Every decision falls on you, big or small. Here's a sneaky one. When you live alone, you don't just lose company. You inherit every decision, no matter how small. Do you fix the dripping faucet now or wait? Should you spend money on that new chair or make do? Is it soup for dinner or should you finally thaw that chicken? It sounds silly until you realize you're carrying the entire mental load of daily life by yourself. When you've got a partner, even casual back and forth, what do you think? Makes the load lighter. When you live alone, you're always the tiebreaker. And sometimes you just don't want the responsibility. One widow told me, the hardest part wasn't grief. It was being the one who had to decide everything, even when I didn't care about the tie. And you know what's funny? You end up negotiating with yourself like a lawyer. Okay, if I defrost the chicken tonight, I'll reward myself with dessert. But if I just make toast, I'll definitely do chicken tomorrow. It's like living with 2 roommates who never agree, except they're both you. The way out? Find a decision buddy. Doesn't have to be a spouse. It can be a sibling, a friend, or even a group chat where you say, hey, should I go with blue curtains or beige? Sometimes you don't need advice. You just need another voice in the room. 9. You realize how fragile independence really is. This is the reality that sneaks up on you the first time you get sick or take a fall. Living alone feels like freedom, until suddenly it feels like a tightrope with no net. One broken arm, one bad flu, and your independence shatters in an instant. Things you never thought twice about, taking out the trash, cooking a meal, even showering, become daunting if not impossible. I remember Henry, 80, saying the scariest moment of his life wasn't the fall that gave him stitches. It was lying there afterward thinking, what if this had been worse? And no one found me. That's the brutal truth of living alone. You're one accident away from realizing how delicate your independence really is. And there's humor in it too if you squint. You start inventing creative ways to do things one-handed, or you discover just how long you can go without vacuuming before it looks like you've adopted a herd of cats. You laugh to keep from crying, but deep down you need backup plans. That's why little packs matter. A neighbor who checks in once a day, a family member who calls every evening, even a medical alert necklace that you once swore you'd never wear. Pride doesn't keep you safe. Systems do. 10. You can feel invisible in a world moving too fast. This one cuts deep, my friend. When you live alone, especially as you get older, it's easy to feel like the world has moved on without you. Invitations come less often. Kids and grandkids get busy. The cashier barely makes eye contact as she swipes your groceries. Technology leaps ahead so quickly you feel like you've been left standing at the station while the train roars by. And the worst part? Nobody's being cruel. It's just that life keeps speeding up for everyone else while yours has slowed down. You go from being a main character in the family story to feeling like a background extra in someone else's film. One senior online put it perfectly. I used to feel like part of the crowd. Now I feel like background noise. That line hit me like a hammer, because that's exactly what invisibility feels like. Not that you're gone, but that you're blurred out. But invisibility can be fought, and the fight is loudness, volunteering, speaking up in the coffee line, wearing the shirt with the ridiculous flamingos on it, telling your story, even if it's just posting old photos online or sharing your back-in-my-day tales. You have to insist on being seen, because if you don't, the world will happily rush past without noticing you. And sometimes you've got to laugh at the absurdity of it all, like when the teenager at the checkout calls you sir or ma'am in that tone that makes you feel like an artifact from a museum. Instead of shrinking, grin big and say, "You bet. And I've got more stories than you've had hot dinners." That's how you reclaim a little spotlight. 11. Holidays and milestones can hit harder than regular days. Here's the truth. Living alone has its steady days, where you go about your routines without too much ache. But then come the holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, those milestone days that sneak up like a punch in the gut. Suddenly, the absence in your house feels louder than anything else. Christmas morning? You remember when the place used to smell like cinnamon rolls and wrapping paper. Now it smells like instant coffee and silence. Birthdays? You might get a call or a text if you're lucky, but it's not the same as someone showing up with a lopsided cake and singing off-key. And anniversaries? Well, those can sting the most. Even if your partner has been gone for years, the calendar has a cruel way of circling the date and whispering, "Remember." One lady I spoke to said she dreaded Valentine's Day more than any other. Not because she was still pining, but because everywhere she looked, TV, shops, even the internet, was screaming about love and togetherness while she sat with her cup of tea, pretending it was just another Tuesday. And here's the kicker. It's not the big parties or grand gestures you miss. It's the little things, like clinking glasses with someone at midnight on New Year's, or hearing "Happy Birthday" sung just for you. The hard reality is that milestones remind you of what's missing. Regular days, you can keep moving forward. But on those marked dates, the weight of living alone presses down heavier. The trick, some folks say, is to create new rituals. One man told me he buys himself a small cake every birthday and sings "Happy Birthday" out loud, to himself. And you know what? He said it actually helps. It's both funny and a little sad, but it's also proof that sometimes you've got to be your own party. So, there you have it, my friend. The unfiltered, sometimes awkward, sometimes painful truths of living alone as we get older. But here's the thing. Yes, these realities can sting, but they don't have to defeat us. They're just reminders to be more intentional about our health, our connections, and about carving joy into everyday life, even when it feels like the world's moving on without us. And honestly, laughing at the messiness of it all helps a lot too. If this resonated with you, don't just disappear into the silence. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, share your story, or pass this along to someone who needs to hear it. Because none of us are really invisible, not as long as we keep speaking up. And trust me, there's a whole lot more we can talk about. The good, the bad, and the downright funny parts of this chapter of life. Until next time, take care of yourself, my friend. And don't forget, life still has a lot of good waiting for you.